everyone who wanted to leave already left. And
Ooh! Burn!
Or isn't it?
Wait, what are you doing right now? Oh, okay.
Just
I
like,
thought you were going
I know
to
there's no negative feedback.
Are you staying here for all lecture?
Okay, I'm gonna quickly give
You have
this
your phone on you?
short lecture on JavaScript
Can I
ecosystem.
use that as my call?
And the general idea of the start of this talk is to give you a lot of buzzwords and explain to you what buzzwords mean. So in case you encounter them online, you know what they mean and what they do. So it's going to be quick and it's going to be a rant. So here's your rant warning. So let me tell you a story. I love stories. So back in 2012, I needed some money. So I started working as a startup. And I was building like an app in JavaScript and stuff like this. And can I swear? No, okay, I won't swear. Anyway,
we'll bleep it out. It's okay.
Oh my god, okay. I was using a lot of JavaScript technologies that were trendy at the time. And let's see if any of you know any of this. Anyone knows what Backbone.js is? Anyone used it? Monday? Monday is old, I guess. Okay, SC. What about _JS templates? Yeah. What is UMD.js loader? I don't think I remember what it means. Grant.js, whatever. My point here is that I used all these technologies. It used to be new in 2012, and now nobody even knows what it means, or like what they did and why, and that's basically the premise of this talk. Web development. It used to be pretty simple. Like you have some HTML pages, you add CSS, some JavaScript, that dancing baby GIF I showed you before. Life was great. And then the Nation of Fire attack. Suddenly we need all these HTML templates. You need to compile stuff like from templates to HTML and JavaScript. You need to hook up library on the server to do that. And maybe later, like your CSS gets really huge, and you need like a special library that will generate CSS for you, and you need to hook up a library in your build process. And maybe later, like the images get really big, and you want to use this tool called ImageMagick to compress the images, and then you need to hook it up into the build process. And maybe again, like something else happens, like JavaScript is new, and suddenly you need to compile JavaScript and make sure that's correct and set up that compilation. And the list goes on. And basically, in the modern day of web development, you need to do shitload of things. Like you need to compile your CSS from like stylus. You need to compile your JavaScript from ECMAScript 7 to ECMAScript 3, so IE6 can pass it. You need like your templates to work. You need to compress images. You need to minimize everything so it's as small as possible. And you need to make sure all of this works together and you can deploy it like on Heroku, some other service. And people build like so many solutions for this. And just to give you an example, like in 2012, I used this tool called Grunt. And then what it does is just like a makefile thing. It just like runs your commands. And then people decided to make it even more fancy and built another tool called Gulp, which basically streams your files and makes all this compilation on the fly a little bit faster. And finally, we arrived to the solution called Webpack, which is a tool that combines all the things together. It hosts your files for development environment. It rebuilds your files on the go, has hot code reloading, like a lot of features, right? So the point here is that people build the tools and they improve it, and then they build a new tool, and they build a third tool, and now we have too many tools to worry about. So here's what Grunt looks like. This is just a screenshot. I'm going to show you a lot of screenshots so you visually remember what they look like. Basically, all of them are icons of some animals. Grunt is just like a JavaScript task runner. So an example of a task is to build my website, or to deploy my website, or build my JavaScript, or build my CSS. Then we have Gulp. It's just red. There's no logo. And then we have Webpack. And I think Webpack is probably like the latest and greatest you can use today. What basically it does is like it takes this graph on the left, all your dependencies, all your files, and then it compiles it to the minimal one single JavaScript, one single CSS, one single whatever asset. Yeah. So this is what build tools are, and the general idea is you use a build tool to optimize your assets. Okay, so now let's move to the next topic, CSS. So we learned a little bit about CSS, and if you use it a lot, you will run into some inconveniences. So for example, let's say you have a website and you have a title that has blue, nice shade of blue as its color, and then you want to use a slightly darker shade of blue somewhere else, and suddenly you realize that if you want your website to look nice, you want to stick to 2 or 3 key colors. So like maybe there's like light blue, dark blue, and really dark blue for like some decoration. And now you have these 3 special numbers that represent your colors, and you need to copy paste them everywhere. But what if you want to change the shade of blue slightly, ever so slightly? Then now you need to go through all your CSS and search and replace all your numbers representing that color and make it different. So wouldn't it be nice if you could have a constant variable, sorry, that makes no sense. If you had a constant value that represents your color, and then that value is used everywhere. And once you want to change it, you just change the constant, and then it propagates everywhere. So that's an example of like CSS variables that people want. Another common feature that people like in CSS is like having a concept of functions. So if you have an animation, and the animation is kind of similar in a lot of different places, but it's optimized for the specific size or specific property, your CSS animation will be similar, but slightly so different. And in that case, to reuse your code, you might want to use something like a function. I'll give you some parameters, and you give me the animation. Well, CSS doesn't know how to do that. So it's another function, like it's another feature that people would like to have with CSS, but CSS doesn't have it. And another one is nested rules duplication. So for example, let's say you have a certain rule, like say you have the same margin on multiple elements of the page, but they're all in different places. You don't want to duplicate this everywhere, then search and replace if you want to edit it slightly. Again, you want to have some like generic rules that applies to a lot of different things, but maybe doesn't necessarily fit into the model of cascading style sheets. So I'm giving you a lot of examples of these random things that you might want to do to minimize the code duplication and use reusable concepts such as variables, functions, and CSS doesn't know how to do this. So your solution is to use a different language that compiles into CSS. And in that different language, you have all these fancy features. And the compiled CSS is this 5 megabyte blob. Oh, I've been talking too long. Basically, yeah, you want to use a different language. So here's an example of this. This language is called Less. And I'm not showing you the example of it because it just looks like CSS with a couple of extra features. But you can go and Google it yourself. That's one of the languages that allows you to do that. And another one is called Sass, which is basically the same. What's going on with my computer? Basically, it's the same, but it's more popular among people who use Ruby on Rails. And there's another one called Stylus that used to be popular among JavaScript people, but it's not even used anymore. And all of them are very similar. They have very similar syntax features, and they do almost the same thing. And it doesn't really matter which one you pick. You can just look at the features. If you need those features, just pick one. Alright. Similar problem exists with JavaScript. JavaScript is a okay language, but it used to be a lot worse. It used to be that JavaScript didn't have any good features. It used to be really confusing. The whole like double equal sign thing used to be like so prevalent that people just used to hate JavaScript and say it's the worst language on earth. And JavaScript didn't improve for a long time. Until around 2015, it was the same. Almost the same as it was in 1997 when it was invented. So, as you can see, there's like a lot of history in JavaScript and a lot of things that people didn't like, and a lot of alternatives arise. So, 2 alternatives that are popular are CoffeeScript and TypeScript, and maybe you'll encounter them in the future. So the basic idea of those languages was to make a new language that compiles into JavaScript. And the new language will have all the good features, and they will remove all the bad features. So CoffeeScript. CoffeeScript is a language that looks similar to Ruby or Python. It uses a lot of white space, and it had a lot of nice features such that classes and maybe anonymous functions, shorthands, and special extensions, types. But it's compiled to JavaScript. So what people would do, they would use CoffeeScript as their main language and compile it down to JavaScript. And here's an example. On the left, we have CoffeeScript. You can notice there's a lot of white space. There are no like curly braces. And on the right is what it compiles to. So on the left, like it defines a class and defines an event listener, and on the right, it like expands into this huge function thing. So people don't use CoffeeScript anymore, mostly, and that happened because JavaScript actually evolved, and JavaScript now has new standards committee, and they release new features, and like it just gets better. So yesterday I gave you an example of async awaited promises that used to not exist in JavaScript, and then they added it later, and now we can use it. But before, it used to be really bad, and like a lot of features were not available, so a lot of languages like CoffeeScript arise. Another language, yeah, this is basically what it is. Another language that you should pay attention to is TypeScript. And TypeScript started as a language that tried to solve very similar issue with JavaScript as CoffeeScript, but it also added the notion of types. So if you programmed in C++ or Java, you know that you have a type system. There's a compilation step that checks everything is correct. And JavaScript doesn't have it. You can write whatever code that you can write, and then you can put it into browser, and then if it breaks, you only know it when you run your page. There's no static compilation step. So TypeScript tries to change that, and nowadays TypeScript evolved into something really good. It's developed by Microsoft, by the person who builds the best language in the world, C#, and literally it has all the best features you can imagine, and it's really popular in enterprise and in some startups. So if you're gonna go and like get a job somewhere as a front-end developer or like web developer using JavaScript, you might need to use TypeScript. Yeah, so here's an example. You have a function, and you can find this new thing, this annotation string, next to the person argument. And that tells it that if you're passing something other than a string, then it should just be an error. And here we're trying to pass something into the greeter function, which is not a string. We're trying to pass an array of integers. And you'll see an error that, what are you doing? These are numbers. This is not a string. You should not do this. So this is good because you can catch a lot of problems in the compilation time. All right, so again, TypeScript has a lot of classes, like bound functions, a lot of good features. It has a type system that's similar to Java, C#, C++. And basically, it works really well when you have a big code base and you're working on a big team in maybe some enterprise environment. So JavaScript also evolved. As I said, it kind of stagnated until 2015, but in 2015 it started getting a lot of major updates. So classes used to be not a thing in JavaScript, and now it's actually officially there. Like anonymous function used to be really confusing because there is this problem with this keyword, which is a context, and now they fix it by using bound functions. There are things like generators, promises, async await that I talked about yesterday. There are like actual hash maps and hash sets available in JavaScript. And for a long time, you had no way to do that. And basically, because of all these new features, you never need to use CoffeeScript anymore. JavaScript just has all the good features again. And it's available in almost every browser at this point, and Node.js. Obviously, in everything except of IE. All right, so what if you still want to target browsers that don't support it? what if you still want to target IE and maybe old Androids and maybe, I think that's it, all Androids and IE. So you can use this new thing called Babel, which is a compiler from new JavaScript to old JavaScript. And the idea here is that you use the new features of JavaScript on the left, and then they compile to the simple JavaScript that any browser can understand. So this is something you might want to use in more like enterprise setting when you're working on a big project that's supposed to work on every browser, on every tablet, on every Amazon reader, or whatever. All right, so moving on from languages to the topic of front-end frameworks. So as we taught you in class, when you want to do anything with the front-end, you usually take your JavaScript, you create new HTML element, you populate the HTML element with what you want, and then you insert it to the page. And that works okay when you have a small app, but when you have a lot of things going on, that can become slow, inefficient, and it might be difficult to work on this code base. So in this case, people started using templates, and then templates became too slow, and they started using other more complicated frameworks. And now the trend is focused not only on performance, but also on the structure of the code. So you want to structure your code such that you have a lot of small components, and each UI component is responsible for each part of the screen, managing the state and managing all the events. And as a developer, you can come into a new code base and you see hundreds of different components, and you can just focus on one component and not understand everything else. So that's kind of like the purpose of a lot of these new frameworks. And if you ever followed the JavaScript ecosystem, you will know that there are literally 40 to 80 different frameworks. And that's a huge number. And usually you only need one in every app. So how do you decide which one to use? And the answer is just use the most popular one, because this way you will get the most help and support. And we'll look at some of them. So again, this is only if your app is actually complicated and you need all these fancy features. And this is what you probably will use at your job. You'll probably use one of the following. React is the most popular one probably right now at this point. It's developed by Facebook, used on Facebook, has a big community of people developing plugins and tools and like different things for it. And that's probably what you want to look at. It's not very easy to learn, I would think. It's not very easy to get used to in the beginning, but it pays off. It's fast and it does what it says it does. And another big one is Vue.js, which is getting really popular right now, especially in China. It's crazy, like China is just a different world. They have their own tools and everything. And Vue.js became the framework of choice. So like big companies in China use this framework, like Alibaba. And the guy who is building it is like a Chinese American who lives in New Jersey and literally spends all his time on Chinese forums explaining people how to use it. So I know this guy, by the way. He's a great guy. He has a good kid, like he has a kid now. Like, it's great. Anyway, Vue.js is a lot easier to understand and a lot easier to get started with. But the problem is that probably if you get a job in the United States, people will be using React. People will be using this one. But if you get a job in China, probably you'll be using this one here. So make your choices. Which side are you on? All right. Moving on. As I said, there are like around 40 to 80 front-end frameworks. I'm not going to cover them at all. I'll just show you this too. And we'll talk about this tool. So let's say you want to build a mobile app, but you don't know anything about iOS development or Android development. But you can throw together like a couple of HTML pages and they work. So you can use this tool called Apache Cordova. What this allows you to do, it allows you to package your app made out of JavaScript and HTML into a native app using WebView. So it looks like your interface is built with HTML and CSS, but it's still running inside of a native app. And you can connect into the native features, such as camera, geolocation, gyroscope, and even like native Google Maps SDK also works. And this tool has been around for a while. Originally, it was developed by startups that got acquired, and then they sold it, and then Apache picked it up. So basically, it's super old. A lot of people rely on it. It's super old and buggy, like really buggy. But if you want something simple, this might work. If you want like a mobile app that has geolocation features, this might just work. All right. Now, what if you want to use JavaScript and HTML to build a native app on Windows or Mac or Linux? So now you can use this tool, which is pretty new. It's developed by GitHub. It's called Elchar. What this allows you to do is very similar to the previous tool. You put everything together into HTML and JavaScript. You package it as a native app for desktop, and you can have access to all the native features on your desktop, like notifications and the toolbar and the tray and the top notification area of Mac, like all of those features work. Next tool is React Native. And we already talked about React previously as a front-end framework. So this tool is more experimental by Facebook. And what this allows you to do is very different from the previous tools. It allows you to do the following. You use React and the JavaScript as if you're manipulating something similar to DOM and HTML. But you're actually manipulating native views of Android and iOS. So literally you're writing your native code, but in JavaScript. So this tool is a lot more complicated. It requires you to understand a lot about mobile development and like toolchain, but it's very important to be aware of. It's probably going to change a lot how people build apps in the near future. And so already used a lot inside native Facebook app, inside of other tools, like a lot of big companies start to use it. All right, so backend frameworks. So we talked to you about Node.js and Express, and there are a lot of different types of backend frameworks. Some of them don't do anything, and they just give you a structure. So Express is one of them, also Flask for Python, I guess, very similar vibe. And some of them are like, they do everything. So in JavaScript land, it's Meteor. In Python, it's Django. In Ruby, it's Ruby on Rails. So every language probably has some big framework. And the big frameworks are usually very opinionated. They tell you how to do something. If you do anything a little bit differently, it's just going to break. Or like it's just going to be really complicated. So beware. Here are the things that I'm going to show you. This is Express. This is the tool we teach you. It's like very small, unopinionated, and minimalist. Basically what it means is that it doesn't tell you how to do anything, like you just decide yourself. And the second framework I'm going to show you is called Meteor. And obviously I would tell you that this is the best way to do anything because I worked there, but it's worth trying. Basically Meteor does a lot of things for you. It gives you user accounts, data synchronization, it integrates with mobile app development, gives you hosting. I think there are very few things Meteor doesn't do. And the big problem with it is that if you don't follow the tutorial, how they tell you to do it, it's just going to be really difficult. But if you're going to do everything like they tell you to do, it's going to be really easy. So this is a trade-off that you might need to take. And yeah, this is like another new one that I really like. It's called Gatsby. And you probably expect it to be like rich and classy and write on expensive cars. But no, it's just a JavaScript framework. Basically what this does, you use React, the most popular front-end framework, to build your app, and then it packages it into a static website. So you cannot use database, you cannot store any state, but you can have pretty interactive websites. And I literally use this framework a lot to build something for MIT clubs. So it's really good. You can build a really like fancy looking website, and then you can package it into one single HTML page and publish it on MIT scripts. I don't know if you ever tried to use MIT scripts. You can use a really old version of Django, you can use a really old version of Ruby on Rails, or you can host static websites. So this allows you to use all the latest JavaScript, but put it on MIT scripts, for example. Oh, there's another one that's really new. Literally came out this last year. I really like it because it's built by my friend in San Francisco. Anyway, you use React. You can notice a lot of them use React, right? Because it's the most popular framework right now. You use React, and you basically build a pretty featured app using the same code on the back end and the front end. Crazy. I'm not going to explain to you what that means. If you're interested, you can look at it later. Anyway, moving on. How do you install your packages? How do you install all the libraries we tell you to use? How do you install Passport.js? How do you install those frameworks? And we tell you to use NPM. And NPM is de facto the package manager for Node.js. So NPM, at some point, like in 2011 or 2010 or something like this, there was a big battle between different tools for like managing your packages. And then NPM won. NPM became the best tool. And then it didn't do anything for like 5 years. It just like stayed the same, became kind of slow. And people were really unhappy. And there are these people at Facebook, again, that came in and said, hey, what if we build a new alternative that's fast and like does all the things better? And this is what came out. It's called Yarn. It's like literally the same thing as NPM, but it's faster. So if NPM is slow for you, you might want to look into this. If you don't have any problems using NPM, just keep using NPM. Testing frameworks. So we didn't cover testing at all, but you know if you take 6005, they'll tell you you need to test everything, and they're not wrong. So at some point, people want to start testing their code. And there are multiple things you might want to do. You might want to do unit testing, end-to-end testing, or you might want to mock some big service and test against it. And as everything happens in JavaScript, you have 5,000 tools to do this, and you don't know which one to use. So I'll just tell you, use this one. It's called Jest. Again, built by Facebook. Oops. It's really good. And there's another one called Mocha, which has a more funny name. So, but they're basically the same. Just use one of these two. And yeah, I showed you a lot of things, right? I showed you front-end frameworks, build tools, languages, libraries, package managers, and here are like just some rough numbers about JavaScript ecosystem. We have 30 to 80 front-end frameworks that people know of, and they all do like slightly different but the same stuff. Some of them are just templates, some of them render, some of them are just animations, some of them are just UI components, but there are a lot of them. And you usually don't want to use more than one. It's like a mutually exclusive choice. You don't need more than one library for doing front-end. Which one do you use? Probably just React or Vue.js if you're Chinese. And it keeps going. People keep making them. And people keep thinking that they're making something better. And sometimes they do. But what happens is that we have a big fragmentation of tools in JavaScript field. And to understand how all of them work, you need to spend so much time on this. It's just unreasonable. You have around like a dozen of backend frameworks, and all of them do very similar things. You have a lot of build tools, and all of them are complicated to set up. And you have a lot of libraries to do like utility stuff, like promises, requests, like something small, parsing. There are at least 3 JavaScript compilers that compile from JavaScript to JavaScript. There was one from Google, there was one from Facebook, there was one from some guy. And you know that one from some guy won, and now everyone uses that. Nobody understands why. And many more will come. If you will do web development seriously, and you'll get a job doing web development, you will have to follow all these trends and all these different libraries that come up. And the idea is not to use all the latest libraries, it's to be aware of what library is useful for you and which library can actually make your life better. Because there's no way you're going to keep up with all of them. So some people say that it's good to have so many new things happen all the time. It's innovation. But if you think about it, building a website shouldn't be that complicated. So why do we have all this complexity coming out of nowhere? And to wrap things up, I'm going to show you this comic. I think it's really funny. You can open it on your computer later at go.614.io/jscomic. And basically, the basic idea of this comic is that there are these two guys digging the hole really, really deep, far deep down. And they have all this discussion like, yo, JavaScript doesn't have a standard library. What if we built a lot of different libraries that do the same stuff and kind of substitute standard library? And they're like, wow, now we have a lot of libraries. What do? How do we distribute these packages? Well, what if we build 5 different tools to use them and like integrate them? And they're like, wow, we need somehow to compile all of them. Like so it goes on and on. Right? Like this big thing actually makes a lot of sense if you are familiar with all of it. But if you just come to the field, it looks like this. Why are we digging the hole? To get out of the hole, right? And it makes 0 sense. But this is the state of JavaScript. There are a lot of libraries, and to fix the problem of having too many libraries is to build another library. And yeah, good luck with that. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, Aaron.
I have a question that might be interesting to some other students here. What's it like in industry where like there's so many frameworks and the stuff is changing so frequently?
Yeah.
Well, how do companies deal with that process? Because like clearly like React seemed like it became super popular within the last few years. But what if a company has hundreds of thousands of lines of code for their website or whatever that was not done in React? Like, can they migrate quickly? Do they consider migrating? Like, I don't know if you have a view into like what that life is like.
So my understanding of what happens is that the company builds a big complicated website and like tool for the customers, and they use some framework that gets outdated in like 5 years. And then they realize that because they're using such outdated tools, nobody wants to work for them. Like developers just come to the interview and they ask, hey, what tools do you use? And they say, oh, we use Kendo.js, which I didn't make up, it's an actual thing. And you wouldn't even know, right? Because they said any word.js at this point. So yeah, they're like, we use Kendo.js, it's great. And new developers are like, hey, I don't know what it is. That sounds really old. I don't want to work with technologies that are old because that kind of keeps me behind the progress, and then later I will not be able to find a new job because of this. And they're like, okay, I don't want to work with you. So these companies realize that developers just don't want to work with them anymore, and they have to migrate to the new stack. They cannot migrate everything at once, so they usually have a legacy code base that nobody wants to work on, and they have the new code base that kind of tries to integrate on top of it. And they start saying, we use React. It's great. Come work with us. And yeah, basically at this point, a lot of this like tooling, like how new is your stack, is kind of a negotiation point for job seekers